What's up, y'all? We are going to wrap up NFL draft coverage by going through and doing my draft grades. The NFL draft is over. Rounds 4 through 7 were finished yesterday. So, what I like to do is I don't like to take the overall grades into 7 rounds because really picks 4 through 7, while still can be very important, they're kind of just roster fillers at that point. You may have your occasional guy that pops and turns either into a superstar or a starter, but for the most part, your starters come out of the first 3 rounds, and that's where I kind of like to grade how do you draft in that first 3 rounds. So when I'm looking first 3 rounds, again, these are more than likely going to be guys that you're filling in for starter needs. So let's go through. This is going to be kind of a longer video, so sorry if you don't like longer videos. You're welcome if you do. But here we go. We're going to go through every NFL team's their first 3-round picks and then my grades. We'll start from the top. Arizona Cardinals, they drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. and Darius Robinson with their 2 first-round picks. In the second round, they drafted Max Melton, the corner out of Rutgers. And then in their third round, where they had 4 third-round picks, they drafted running back Trey Benson out of Florida State, Isaiah Adams, offensive tackle from Illinois, Tip Ryman, tight end from Illinois, and then Elijah Jones, corner from Boston College. I gave this team a I did get that right, Boston College. Just want to make sure. Sorry. I gave this team an A. This is a team that, like the Houston Texans last year, had a lot of draft picks to kind of cover a lot of needs. And the difference between the Cardinals and the Texans last year were the Texans were still looking for a quarterback. Cardinals already have one, Kyler Murray. So the fact that they were able to fill in needs that weren't a quarterback, obviously getting who I think and many people thought Marvin Harrison Jr. best player in the class at pick 4 was an A-plus steal. Picking Darius Robinson at pick 20, was it 27, I believe it was? Yeah. There were some other guys on the board at the time. I do like Darius Robinson's upside, but I think there were a couple other guys on the board if you were going to take an edge rusher / defensive tackle that you could have taken. Max Melton in the second round. I'm a real big fan of Max Melton, so I was big there. I was kind of advocating at some point for the Cardinals to take a running back. One, James Conner is just not your prototypical running back in today's NFL, but he's a serviceable starting running back. But he also has an injury history, and last year they kind of went through that, kind of playing running back by committee. So now to kind of get Trey Benson in there as your actual backup running back should help. Isaiah Adams is kind of just going to be there as a rotational offensive tackle. I'm not really sure what the Cardinals' fixation is with drafting tight ends, but I think at that point, I believe when they drafted Tip Ryman, Jatavion Sanders was still on the board, so wasn't a huge fan of that pick. And then Elijah Jones is kind of a rotational piece corner, is an okay pick. Overall, like I said, A grade, just an A grade for the Cardinals. They filled in a lot of spots that they needed. The Atlanta Falcons. This one we'll probably talk about a little bit more. So I gave them a B+ grade for the first 3 rounds. They drafted Michael Penix Jr. with the 8th overall pick, Rook Ahorahor from for Clemson, defensive tackle from Clemson in the second round, and Braylon Trice, the edge rusher from Washington, in the third round. Really, really big fans of the second and third round picks. I think Braylon Trice in the third round is honestly kind of a steal a little bit. Even though guys like T'Vondre Sweat, Michael Hall was still on the board for the Falcons to take, Ruka Hora, I think is a good pick for them in the second round. But the Michael Penix Jr. pick, let's talk about it, because that was the most controversial pick of the weekend. So Falcons get up at 8. We've kind of been projecting this whole time they're going to need edge rusher. They're going to go somewhere on defense. Even if they didn't go edge rusher, maybe a corner, maybe a D tackle, maybe they go Byron Murphy. And at pick 8, right before the pick, we get the Adam Schefter. They're looking at a quarterback. And Then they select Michael Penix Jr. Then it comes out that Michael Penix was the second best quarterback on their draft board, probably behind Caleb Williams. We didn't get to see their whole draft board, but you can only assume it was behind Caleb Williams. And they said, he throws the prettiest ball in the draft, which if you watched my quarterback video, I don't disagree. He probably does throw the prettiest ball in the draft. But here's the problem. I get it. You're trying to be sure of yourself that if Kirk Cousins isn't truly, ready off injury, doesn't come back the same, you're trying to make sure that you're good at the quarterback position. But here's the problem. Let's say Kirk Cousins is perfectly fine. You just signed him to a 3-year, $160 million deal. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, Kirk Cousins is perfectly fine, gets back to playing to the level that we know Kirk Cousins can play, takes the Falcons to the playoffs, maybe makes it to the second round, obviously plays himself into the second year, and then even the third year, where we get 3 solid years of Kirk Cousins. Michael Penix is about to turn 24. That means if you do get your full contract out of Kirk Cousins, which after paying him $160 million, you would hope you do. That means by the time Michael Penix starts his first NFL game as like your full-time starter, he's going to be 27 years old. 27. You're talking about that is the age of guys most guys are playing into their second contract. And don't get me wrong, I like Michael Penix. But out of all the quarterbacks in the draft, probably for me behind Jaden Daniels and Drake May and Bo Nix, as far as quarterbacks that would be ready if they had to start week 1, Michael Penix is probably more of a week 1 starter than a project sit behind and learn quarterback. And I just wasn't a fan. One, if you're going to take a quarterback like that to secure yourself the future for maybe even wait 3 years, then you take a guy like J.J. McCarthy who's younger. The guy that can afford to wait, the guy that probably needs to wait that long anyway. Not the 24-year-old quarterback that spent 5 years in college, dealt with injuries and, doesn't, not saying that he's perfect in terms of he doesn't need to sit, but probably doesn't need to sit that long. So it's a head scratcher in Atlanta. We don't know what quite is going to happen now with that. Obviously, Kirk Cousins wasn't happy about it. He was blindsided by it, which that's the other thing. If you just paid a guy $160 million, don't you think the decent thing to do would be to warn the guy that you're about to draft a quarterback, or that you're even thinking of drafting a quarterback? It's just, I'm not really sure what Atlanta is doing. So I give them a B+. It could have been an A, but again, the Michael Penix draft pick is it's making me question a lot of things. Next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens. They selected Nate Wiggins in the first round, Roger Rosengarter in the second, and Adisa Isaac in the third. I gave this team an A+ grade for their first 3-round draft picks. An A+. Yes, you heard that right. Nate Wiggins is an absolute steal at pick 30 for the Baltimore Ravens. And it seems like this happens every year. It seems like every year in the first round, there is one player that probably is a bona fide top 15 prospect. And I would say Nate Wiggins was right there. And just somehow falls to the Baltimore Ravens. I just don't understand it. But they got a huge steal in the second round right there. Or in the first round. Second round, Roger Rosengarten. Again, it was reported that Lamar was wanting to look at offensive tackles himself and kind of help make the decision on offensive tackles. So, excuse me, tackle was needed. So if this is a Lamar pick, I hope Lamar likes it, and I hope this pans out for him. And then Adisa Isaac in the third round is a huge steal for them as well. So that's why I gave them an A+ grade. Next, the Buffalo Bills, where they selected Keon Coleman in the second round because they traded out of the first round. They originally traded back to pick 32, and then they traded pick 32 to Detroit to go back to 33 to the first pick of the second round, where they picked up Keon Coleman. Also in the second round, they drafted Cole Bishop for the safety from Utah, and then Dwayne Carter in the third round, the defensive tackle out of Duke. I gave them a B rating. I do like that they were able to move out of the first round and still be able to take Keon Coleman. Cole Bishop at the safety position, before he goes before, I believe it was Tyler New. He went before Tyler Newbin, which I had a higher grade on. Let me double check that. And Javon Bullard, who I considered better as well. So that's kind of why. No, he went after Tyler Newbin, actually. Oh, and he went after Javon Bullard. So just scratch that. But Cole Bishop is fine. I thought his running mate, Savon Baki was better. But it's an okay pick. Wasn't necessarily mad at it. Dwayne Carter, it's a good pickup in the second round. Oh, that's who it was. Sorry. Cole Bishop taking over guys like Josh Proctor, Trey Taylor, Malik Mustafa, Jaden Hicks. That's the one I was looking at. Sorry. That's why I kind of was, it's an okay pick for them. So I gave them a B. Next up, the Carolina Panthers. And actually, I got that one wrong, too, because when the Bills traded back, they traded back with Carolina to get that first. So it's Carolina. And then when they moved up to 32, they took Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, the wide receiver. Bryce Young really wanted Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette really wanted to be in Carolina. So it was kind of a match made in heaven. But again, guys like Keon Coleman still on the board. Excuse me. Guys like Keon Coleman still on the board. I think it was a tad bit of a reach. But Jonathan Brooks, who they also picked up in the second round at running back, team that needed kind of a running back. I don't mind them going after that in the second round. And then Trevin Wallace, kind of a project linebacker out of Kentucky. I give this team a B- grade. Again, kind of a reach with Xavier Legette. They kind of get the project linebacker with Trevin Wallace. Wasn't really, it just didn't really make a whole lot of sense, especially with at the time when they took a linebacker. Someone double checking to make sure I'm right. Yes. This time, with a linebacker being a need, they passed up on Peyton Wilson and took Trevin Wallace. That's why I'm kind of holding them back to a B-. Next, the Chicago Bears, A+ grade. I mean, they end up with Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick, which was expected to happen. With the 9th overall pick, they got Rome Odunze. Again, another fantastic pick for them. And then Kyron Amagaji, the offensive tackle out of Yale in the third round, who I had a high grade on. They got an A+ grade. I can't argue with what they did in the draft. Cincinnati Bengals. Excuse me, I've got a lot of congestion going on right now. Cincinnati Bengals, I gave them an A-. They got Amarius Mims out of Georgia. You know, they just signed Trent Brown this offseason. They have Orlando Brown, so they have 2 solidified tackles. So for Amarius Mims to kind of sit back and learn from those 2, all 3 of them being huge offensive tackles, Cincinnati kind of came into this and said, all right, we're done with playing rotational tackles. You know, if one of these 2 were to get hurt, we have Armarius Mims to slide in there. They got Chris Jenkins in the second round, which they needed a defensive tackle because they have to have a DJ Reader fill in. And then in the third round, they were able to draft Jermaine Burton, the wide receiver out of Alabama, who I think will be a good slot receiver to replace Tyler Boyd. And then McKinley Jackson, defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, was a solid pickup. So I gave them an A-. The Cleveland Browns, who only had 2 picks in the first 3 rounds, their first round pick went to Houston, which inevitably went to Minnesota. But I gave them an A with their 2 picks. They got Michael Hall Jr. out of Ohio State, defensive tackle. That middle of the defense was kind of a huge hole for them. Michael Hall will fill that in perfectly. And then Zach Zinter out of Michigan, as kind of just another rotational piece to that Browns offensive line that's already really good. Zach Zinter will be able to fill in nicely right there. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody's favorite team to make fun of, everybody's favorite team to make jokes of. But First round, they were able to get Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. A really athletic offensive tackle, and they needed a tackle. And they were able to trade back and get him, and that's something I really like. They didn't necessarily reach for him. They were able to trade back and get him, so really like that for them. Marshawn Nealon, the edge rusher out of Western Michigan, it was kind of a head scratcher at first because we kind of expected them to take a running back in the second round, but with Jonathan Brooks already off the board, they probably sat back and said, maybe we don't like any of the other running backs. I did like the Marshawn Nealon pick for them. Cooper Bebe, the guard out of Kansas State, that's a steal for them in the third round. And then also in the third round, they were able to get Marist Liafau, a linebacker out of Notre Dame. Could just be they needed a linebacker with Leighton Vander Esch calling it quits. Need linebacker help, and that'll be a good rotational piece for them. Next up, the Denver Broncos. First 3 rounds, they were able to get, with only 2 picks in the first 3 rounds, Bo Nix at pick 12, the quarterback out of Oregon, and Jonah Ellis, edge rusher out of Utah. Gave him a B. I still think at pick 12, I understand because of the way the draft was going. They had to kind of take him right there or else he wouldn't have been available. And then Jonah Ellis in the third round, I think, is a steal for them. But again, the Bo Nix pick, even at 12, I think is a little bit of a reach. That's why I gave him a B. Detroit Lions, again, 2 picks in the first 3 rounds. They were able to get Terrion Arnold out of Alabama in the first round when they traded up with the Dallas Cowboys. And then they were able to get Ennis Rakestraw Jr. in the second round. They didn't have a third-round pick, and I gave them an A. They obviously have a need at the secondary, and it was terrible for them last year. They brought in Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay in free agency. Now you have Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. I think they're ready to go with a new revamped secondary. Green Bay Packers, Jordan Morgan, offensive tackle out of Arizona in the first round. Edgerrin Cooper, Javon Bullard in the second round. Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M. Javon Bullard, safety out of Georgia. Third round, they got Marshawn Lloyd, running back out of USC, and then Tyron Hopper, linebacker out of Missouri. Wasn't a real big fan of the Jordan Morgan pick. I would have liked them to take Graham Barton right there as kind of the flex guy that they could have put in multiple positions, at guard, at center, at tackle, however they wanted to do it. Even if you were just going to take a guard, because I think Jordan Morgan's going to end up moving to guard for them. I would have went Jackson Powers Johnson right there as well. But Edgerrin Cooper, I had as the best linebacker in the draft class. Javon Bullard, I had as the second best safety in the draft class. Marshawn Lloyd, I had the best running back in the draft class. Tyron Hopper, I think, is a good rotational piece linebacker. So I gave the Green Bay Packers a B just simply because of the Jordan Morgan pick. Moving on, Houston Texans, they didn't have very many draft picks. They did end up with 3, though, between the second and third round. And they went Kamari Lassiter, corner out of Georgia, Blake Fisher, tackle out of Notre Dame, and Kalen Bullock, safety out of USC. Gave him a B+. Really liked the Kamari Lassiter pick to line up next to Derek Stingley. Blake Fisher is an okay rotational piece, offensive tackle. And then Kalen Bullock, there were a couple other safeties I liked on the board at the time when they picked him. All right, now we get to my favorite team, the Indianapolis Colts. And at first, I was not a big fan of the first round Laiatu Latu pick. And here's why. As you all know, I had Laiatu Latu as my best edge rusher in the class. I had him as a top 10 prospect. The problem was, it's not that I didn't like Laiatu Latu, the player. At pick 15 for the Indianapolis Colts, no corners had been taken off the board just yet. Corner was a need for Indianapolis. And they had their selection of corners that they could have went. They could have picked any of them. And then they went edge rusher. So at first I was very upset. This is kind of like how it went for Mark Pope for me for Kentucky. At first I was very upset. But then when you sit back and you think about it, you have DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart up front, alongside Kwity Paye that are all three of them are going to draw so much attention in the middle. Did I get Laiatu Latu on the outside edge rushing, potentially one-on-one coverage with a lot of different probably right tackles? I would probably assume Quiddy usually takes on the left side. I like it. I kind of do. Obviously, he's got to get medically cleared. That was another big thing. He's not medically cleared to play just yet, and so that's a big question mark. But if he's healthy, if he plays, and again, I get DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Quiddy Pay taking up so much attention that Laiatu Latu is going to get a lot of one-on-ones with right tackles on the outside. I like that. And then I thought one of the steals of the draft that they were able to manage is getting Adonai Mitchell at pick 52 in the second round. That's absurd how Adonai Mitchell fell so far back. So really like that we were able to snag that. And then Matt Goncalves, out of Pittsburgh, offensive tackle. He'll just be a rotational piece, offensive tackle for us. I gave us an A-. Great. Mainly because of the Adonai Mitchell steal in the second round. Jacksonville, they got Brian Thomas Jr. in the first round. Mason Smith, defensive tackle out of LSU. In the second, Jerrion Jones, corner out of Florida State. I gave them a B-, and it's really the lowest grade I gave of any team. There's two other teams I gave a lower or at the same grade to. But part of that is, at what point are we going to try to help Trevor Lawrence stay upright? Not just get him a receiver. You know, you had Christian Kirk, you have Gabe Davis, you have Zay Jones. You're solid at the wide receiver position already. Would have used in this spot to get him some help on the offensive line. And then in the next two picks in the second and third round, for you not to use a pick on an offensive tackle or offensive lineman at all. Not a fan. That's why I gave him a B-. Kansas City Chiefs, they were able to snag Xavier Worthy and then Kingsley Suamatae out of BYU. You know me. Kingsley Suamatae was one of my top offensive tackles in the draft. So for him to get him in the late second is a huge steal. Xavier Worthy, I'm kind of up in the air with. I don't know if this is going to turn out to be like a mini Tyreek Hill for them, or is it just another Kadarius Toney? I just don't know. It'll be interesting to see with hopefully Rashee Rice, if he's not going to be in too much trouble. Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and then Hollywood Brown in this offense. Be interesting to see. I gave them an A. I want to go A+, but with that question of I don't know if it's just another Tyreek Hill or Kadarius Toney, I just stuck at the A. The Raiders, they went Brock Bowers round 1, Jackson Powers Johnson round 2, Delmar Glaze round 3. I gave him a B-. Listen, I know the Raiders were upset in the first round when all the quarterbacks went off the board before pick 13, when they picked. But at that pick right there, I would have went offensive line or corner for them. I'd have went Talise Fuaga or, Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, somebody right there, because their secondary is absolutely toast. And then to try to keep whatever quarterback you want to play, Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, upright is another thing. So they went Brock Bowers. I feel like they kind of just freaked out with all the quarterbacks off the board, just went Brock Bowers, best player available. Love the Jackson Powers Johnson pick, obviously. And then Delmar Glaze, it's kind of an okay pick. There were more offensive tackles to take at the time. So I went B-. Chargers, they got Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, Ladd McConkey out of Georgia, Junior Colson out of Michigan. I went A. They didn't trade at all. Joe Alt alongside Rashawn Slater. Those are two nasty offensive tackles to have in the NFL. Ladd McConkey is the most Jim Harbaugh wide receiver ever. So that makes sense. And then Junior Colson, they lost Eric Kendricks. They lost Kenneth Murray at linebacker. They needed a linebacker. So it's an easier transition to get the Mike linebacker that you had in college that knows the defense already. The LA Rams, they were able to get Jared Verse in the first round, Braden Fisk in the second, Blake Corum in the third, and then Cameron Kitchens in the third. I gave him an A- because I really like the Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, and Cameron Kitchens pick. Jared Verse sliding to them at 19 is a huge steal for them. Braden Fisk to kind of not fill Aaron Donald's shoes, but fill in that defensive tackle spot. Really like Cameron Kitchens in the secondary at safety. I think he's got a chance to start right away. I'm just very questioning the Blake Corum pick. Kyron Williams was fantastic for you this year. So what was the need for a running back in the 3rd round? I just don't understand it. So I give him an A-. Miami Dolphins, Chop Robinson, Patrick Paul. Again, kind of like Jacksonville, they needed to help keep Tua upright. So I don't understand the Chop Robinson pick, especially when you have 2 edge rushers already, and Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, who are extremely just like Chop Robinson as an edge rusher. Just didn't understand it. Patrick Paul was one of my better offensive tackles in the class. It's kind of why I kept him up to the B-. So, Minnesota Vikings, they only had to trade up 1 pick to get J.J. McCarthy, which I like. And then they traded up from 23 to 16 to be able to snag Dallas Turner. And what a steal that was for them. So, really like that for them. I gave them an A. They only had to go up 1 pick to get J.J. McCarthy, who will probably sit a year behind Sam Darnold, hopefully. And then Dallas Turner to kind of fill in the why am I drawing a blank on the guy's name? The edge rusher they just lost to Houston. Oh, this is gonna kill me. Danielle Hunter. God, why am I drawing a blank on that name? Dallas Turner will fill in for Danielle Hunter, and that's a great pickup for them. He'll have a chance to win Defensive Rookie of the Year right away. Move on to the New England Patriots. They selected Drake May with the 3rd overall pick in the draft. Obviously, you all know Drake May is my number 1 quarterback in the draft class, so I gave them a great grade for that one. Then they selected Jalen Polk at wide receiver in the 2nd round. Not really a fan of that pick. I know some of the commentators were a fan, but I was not. And then Caden Wallace, an offensive tackle out of Penn State. Again, just kind of, I was more of a fan of their 4th round pick than I was their 2nd round pick when they got Javon Baker out of Central Florida. That's kind of one of my hot takes from this draft class this season is by the end of the year, Javon Baker out of Central Florida will be wide receiver 1 for the New England Patriots. He will quickly become Drake May's favorite target. The New Orleans Saints, they got Talise Fuaga in the 1st round, who kind of fell to them. What a great pickup that was for them. And then in the 2nd round, Kool-Aid McKinstry fell to them. Another great pickup for them. I went A+ overall grade for them. Kool-Aid was a 2nd-rated corner on my draft board. Talise Fuaga was a 2nd-rated offensive tackle on my board, and for both of them to fall to them just like that was great pickups. Giants, they got Malik Nabers in the 1st round, 2nd-best wide receiver in the class. Makes sense. Tyler Nubin, who I had as the 3rd-rated safety in the class. Great pickup for them after losing Xavier McKinney. Then Andrew Phillips, corner from Kentucky, in the 3rd round. It's an okay pick for them. I went A- for the New York Giants. I just really like that they didn't reach for a quarterback at pick 6. New York Jets, they got Olu Fashanu at tackle in with the 11th pick after they traded back with the Vikings 1 pick. And then Malachi Corley in the 3rd round. I gave him an A-. And again, I know I've said before, Olu Fashanu is the most overrated prospect in the class. But what I really liked for them is that he doesn't necessarily have to play right away. He can sit back and learn. They've got Tyron Smith, they've got Morgan Moses, and as long as one of those 2 don't get injured, as their history would say, he's going to get to sit back and learn. And I think that's going to benefit him more than having to go to a team that he's going to play for right away. And then Malachi Corley was a top 10 wide receiver on my draft board. For him to fall pick 3, I think he will quickly, in the slot, become a favorite target for Aaron Rodgers this upcoming season. Philadelphia Eagles, they got Quinyon Mitchell in the 1st round, which how he fell to them at pick 22 is beyond me. They then managed to get Cooper DeJean in the 2nd round, which how he fell to them in the 2nd round is again beyond me. And then Jalix Hunt, edge rusher. The edge rusher out of Houston Christian. just kind of a guy that they want to take a chance on in the third round as an athletic freak. So I gave them an A. I don't know if I said it. I gave the New York Jets an A- on theirs as well. Pittsburgh Steelers. Troy Fautanu in the first round, Zach Frazier in the second round, and then getting Roman Wilson and Peyton Wilson in the third round. I gave the Steelers an A+. I mean, what a draft class for this team. They've shore up the middle of their offensive line with Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier. They solidify the middle of the offensive line. They go and get themselves another receiver that'll probably play out the slot in Roman Wilson. And Steelers drafting wide receivers, I trust whatever they pick. Peyton Wilson at linebacker in the third round, who I had as the second highest linebacker grade in the class. I mean, this team drafted phenomenally. The San Francisco 49ers, they took Ricky Purcell in the first round, Renardo Green in the second, Dominic Pooney in the third. I give this team a B-. Dude, if you're going to take a wide receiver in the first round, why Ricky Purcell? Why not Keon Coleman? Why not Xavier Legette? Why not, what did we you passed on Keon Coleman, you passed on Ladd McConkey, you passed on Roman Wilson. I just didn't understand it. I like Ricky Purcell, just not as a first round talent in San Francisco. Not a fan, especially in the first round. You could have taken a corner. You had your selection of them. Only Nate Wiggins and Nate Wiggins, Terrion Arnold, and Quinyon Mitchell being off the board. You could have still taken, your selection of corners. You could have had Cooper DeJean, who I thought would have been perfect for them. They like their guys that are multi-positional. Cooper DeJean that can line up as your slot corner or play safety for you. Thought that would have been a fantastic pick. Kool-Aid McKinstry sitting right there would have been a fantastic pick. Kamari Lassiter sitting right there would have been a fantastic pick. I just don't understand it. And then you also needed an offensive line help. You had guys sitting there that you could have taken. Just not a big fan of the Ricky Purcell pick. And then Renardo Green in the second round. Not a big fan of that corner pick. Yeah, just wasn't a big fan. Seattle Seahawks, they took Byron Murphy in the first round, Christian Haynes in the second. Love it. A+. Christian Haynes was one of my top-rated inside offensive linemen in the class. Byron Murphy was my top-rated defensive tackle. Mike McDonald going the same round as Jim Harbaugh. Building the Seattle Seahawks up front. And you get one of the better inside offensive linemen and then get the best D tackle in the class. That's how you do it. Tampa Bay, I like their draft picks as well. I gave them an A-. Graham Barton in the first round. Love that. Chris Braswell in the second round as an edge rusher. I actually really like that. Tyke Smith is one of my top 10 safeties. I like that pick. Jalen McMillan in the late third round. Also kind of another steal for them. So I gave them an A-. Tennessee Titans, I gave them an A-. And it could have been an A+. But J.C. Latham in the first round, I felt like was kind of a reach at pick 7. After the Chargers kind of shocked you and took Joe Alt, what I would have done if I was the Titans is I would have traded back a little bit, let one of those quarterback needy teams maybe come up, get some extra draft picks, and you probably still could have got J.C. Latham. But nonetheless, they got T'Vondre Sweat in the second round, who I had as the second highest rated defensive tackle. That's why I went A-. And then finally, the Washington Commanders, who I said Arizona was in the same boat as Houston. Washington is really in the same boat as Houston as they were last year. New head coach who's defensive-minded. You need a quarterback, and you've got a lot of spots to fill. So they went second overall. They went Jaden Daniels. I like the pick. Second round, they went Jer'Zhan Newton. Which how he fell to them in the second round is beyond me. Still in the second round, they were able to take Mike Sainris still at corner. Love that pick as well. In the third round, still in the second round, they were able to get Ben Sinnott, who I had as the second-rated tight end in the class, who I think will quickly be a quick favorite target for Jaden Daniels. And then in the third round, they got Brandon Coleman out of TCU. I do like that pick for them. And then Luke McCaffrey, kind of a flexible, do it all kind of guy that they can do a lot of different things with on offense. If Cliff Kingsbury in Washington wants to get tricky with it, you could run a lot of different, reverse plays with Luke McCaffrey. Hell, you could even run a play where Luke McCaffrey throws the ball. Dude's a former quarterback. So I really like their draft. I gave them an A. So those are my draft grades. Yeah, I'm not a whole lot of bad draft classes. Like I said, the lowest grade I gave were B minuses. So I think a lot of teams got exactly what they needed. So really excited. Really excited for my Colts. But really excited for the rest of the league. Be a fun year. Can't wait to see how it pans out. And with that, we're already 35 minutes in, so I won't keep y'all here much longer. So with that being said, we are signing off of here.